I said on the Department of Justice I would stay uninvolved. Now, I may get involved at some point if it gets worse.
You look at the corruption at the top of the FBI, it's a disgrace. And our Justice Department, which I try and stay away from, but at some point I won't.
What's happening is a disgrace. And at some point, I wanted to stay out. But at some point, if it doesn't straighten out properly, I want them to do their job. I will get involved, and I'll get in there if I have to.
How many ways can you spell obstruction? Almost since the Mueller investigation's infancy, President Trump has been hinting that he'll take control of the Justice Department if he doesn't like what he sees. Now his critics believe he's trying to do just that by installing anti-Mueller Matthew Whitaker atop the Justice Department. Joining the table, former CIA director, now MSNBC senior national security and intelligence analyst John Brennan. What do you make of what we're seeing with I mean, I feel as though you and your former colleagues all but tried to warn us that this might be the direction we're heading when this president, before he was inaugurated, declared war on the intelligence community. Now it's the Justice Department.
Well, I think Mr. Trump realizes what he might have done in the past or what others around him might have done that could implicate them in some type of criminal activity, or at least questions about the legality of it. And that's why he's been trying to delegitimize the Department of Justice, try to delegitimize the press, because I think he recognizes that there are vulnerabilities there. And so it looks like, as we're getting closer and closer to additional indictments, as well as the Mueller report, I think that he's getting increasingly nervous and concerned. That's why putting someone like Matt Whitaker as the acting AG, I think it's another blatant effort to try to control that which is underway in the Department of Justice.
You chose your words carefully, but I want to see if I understand what you're saying. You believe this is about his personal legal exposure.
I don't know the status of the investigation. I just know that the Mueller team, as well as the FBI team before that, this investigation has been going on for more than 2 years. It started the end of July of 2016. And so I think that
counterintelligence investigation.
Yes, and initially it's looking at whether or not there was some type of criminal conspiracy working with the Russians trying to interfere in the campaign. So that's one bucket that he's looking at. The other bucket is obstruction of justice. But then the third bucket is what type of financial irregularities or illegal activities of defrauding the government that Paul Manafort was charged and convicted of, and whether or not any of the individuals in that inner circle are going to be implicated for some type of possible criminal activity in one of those three buckets. And so I do believe that Mr. Trump recognizes that it's getting tighter around him, and that the Mueller investigation is now coming to some type of conclusion, whether it is in the coming weeks or coming months. But I'm sure he feels quite vulnerable, whether it's for himself or for his family or for his close associates.
A former intelligence official called the firing of Sessions a medium probability, high impact event that someone like Robert Mueller would have been prepared for to the nanosecond. Do you think that Robert Mueller spent the fall, and I ask you this because it is so opaque to the civilians, you know, we don't know what he's doing, but you understand a professional like Robert Mueller. What do you think his mindset was heading into a fall where you know, Donald Trump out loud said that he desired these changes that we're seeing in the Justice Department? What was Mueller doing?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is that Mueller didn't want to do anything that was going to have in any way either the reality or the perception of interfering in the election. But also, the firing of Jeff Sessions was the worst kept secret in Washington. Right. It happened very quickly. So I'm sure that Bob Mueller, as well as Rod Rosenstein, anticipated that and would have taken steps to ensure that their investigative work was not going to, in fact, be buried. And so whether or not there's already moved forward with the sealed indictments or whatever, or have the report ready to go. But now, in particular, since the Democrats have taken over the House in January, there's no way that that report that Mueller issues is going to be buried, because it is subject to subpoena on the part of the committees of the House. So I feel as though that Mr. Trump and others are really now worried, because there are a number of atmospheric changes that have taken place that make, I think, their life a little bit more difficult. I wonder whether or not what we've seen over the last couple of days, both in France as well as here in the United States, is that Mr. Trump is brooding and sulking and really concerned and quite anxious, and who knows what's going on behind the scenes, and whether or not he's withdrawing as a result of the pressure that he is feeling, which is dangerous for someone who holds the office of the presidency to feel that they are under assault from the Department of Justice.
He's certainly, whether he's brooding or doing something else, he's certainly carving out a lot of time to do it. They put a lid, which means nothing else public will happen in the day, on the president yesterday at 10 in the morning. It was Veterans Day, and he didn't do anything. He didn't go to Arlington, as you pointed out, Jonathan. In France, over the weekend, he didn't visit a World War I cemetery. You've been warning, really, since the early months of the Trump presidency about potential repercussions around the world of his style of leadership or abdication of it. Do you think we're seeing some of those repercussions around the world and the rebuke of nationalism from Macron and others?
Yes, well, I think what Macron, Trudeau, and others are saying publicly, which is in direct contravention of some of the things that Mr. Trump has said about nationalism and other things. I think it demonstrates that our allies and partners around the world may in fact sense that the time is now to stand up to Mr. Trump. Maybe they're also detecting that his political footing is corroding, and now's the time to actually change tack on this because they don't have to worry about him over the longer term.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on that subject, the idea of these alliances that have been decades old being strained, something that you can speak very well of is, on a practical matter, it's not just about trade or economics, but let's say something like intelligence sharing. Like if there's a cooling off between governments, if suddenly France, let's say, feels like they can't trust the United States, what sort of level does that have on, what sort of impact does that have on a level like with the CIA and its counterparts, intelligence agencies and elsewhere?
Well, I'm hoping that the intelligence agencies, both American and French and British and others, Canadian, are still sharing as much intelligence as necessary in order to keep our country safe and secure. But many of them may be concerned that as Mr. Trump feels more and more of this pressure, whether or not sharing very sensitive intelligence with the United States, if that's going to be shared with the White House, how is that going to be acted upon, or is it going to be kept secret? There have been real concerns about some missteps that were made by the administration where information was either inadvertently leaked or intentionally shared when it shouldn't have been, because it put sources and methods of our allies' intelligence services at great risk. So it can have reverberations throughout the system, but I really believe that the law enforcement intelligence professionals and the diplomats are continuing to do what they can, irrespective of what the situation is now with Mr. Trump.
Do you think that Gina Haspel and everyone that works at the CIA tells the president everything that they know?
I don't know whether or not they have the opportunity to do that, because it's my understanding that there is not as much interaction with Donald Trump as there was with previous presidents. So I don't know what Gina Haspel is able to say.
I ask it because around the time of the Khashoggi killing, so a couple of people pointed out to me that it'd be interesting to see the delta between what the CIA knew and what the president said, and whether he was actually being briefed the things that came out of his mouth, or if he was just parroting Saudi talking points and propaganda.
Well, it seemed it was the latter. But I think it's...
Do you think the House will investigate that? You think Adam Schiff's committee will look at that?
Absolutely. Even the Senate Intelligence Committee, I think, will look at that. And I think Gina Haspel has an obligation to make sure she tells the truth and makes it clear to Mr. Trump exactly what it is that we know and what our analysis and assessment is involving, including the Saudi involvement in this and Mohammed Salman's involvement in this.
Last question. How did you feel, as someone who's served the country for as long as you have, to see Veterans Day come and go and the president pass up the opportunity to pay tribute to our veterans?
That's what makes that so puzzling, even for a Donald Trump. It's easy to do. It's a must-do, in my mind, to pay homage to all those veterans from World War I and who died on foreign soil, and to not go and do the bare minimum, which is to appear there and to stay in the ambassador's residence for so many hours. There are responsibilities and obligations on the part of the President of the United States, and they need to live up to it. And every president that I served before did that. Not going to Arlington Cemetery, not participating in these very, very important and very foundational elements of our history. That is inexcusable. And that's why I really do believe that there's something else here. It's not just he was concerned about the rain. It may be that he is behind the scenes and really concerned about where things are going And that is a dangerous time, because if he feels that he is being increasingly cornered, how is that going to manifest itself? Whether it's in the firings of his members of cabinet, or it just shows it's a White House administration in disarray. And all of these moves, including today, in terms of people being walked out, or the tension between the First Lady's staff and the National Security Council, this reflects this underlying tension that's just eating away at our government at the highest level. And it is really quite disconcerting and concerning. And it's not just disconcerting from the standpoint of, Americans watching it, it's how our partners and allies and adversaries are watching it. And I still am awaiting the awakening of the storied Republican Party. It's going to awake from its slumber of appeasement. And that's what it is. They need to step up and fulfill their responsibilities as American citizens and as elected officials.
Can I just ask you one last question? If you were offering an intelligence assessment of the American president for another country, how would you describe him? I mean, you just described him basically as hunkered down and brooding and waiting for some imminent news about something.
I would say that this is, even in an administration that has been so beset by problems, this is the most unsettled moment. Wow. Because a number of things have come together. The Democrats are now in control of the House. They're going to be able to have real investigative powers. You have a lot of people who are maybe leaving the administration. Attorney General has been sacked. And you have the Mueller investigation that's coming to fruition. It's the confluence of factors together, I would say to a foreign leader, America is now going through a real rough patch, and I'm hoping that, the secretaries of state and defense and others are going to keep it on a strong track. But I must tell you that the President of the United States is having some real issues to deal with, and it may manifest itself on the global stage in some unsettling ways.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.